All right, let's do this. Get ready for a deep dive into one of history's most intense events, the French Revolution.
Yeah.
We're going to look at what caused it, what happened because of it, and maybe even find out some little-known facts along the way.
What always gets me is how could a society that was like totally stuck in its ways change so much so fast?
Right. It's crazy. Like, you have France in the late 1700s, a country where everyone had their place, you know? You had the clergy and the nobility and then, like, everyone else.
Yeah.
They were all crammed into this huge group called the Third Estate.
Right.
And the burden on those people, man, it was heavy.
Yeah.
They were basically carrying the whole country on their backs, paying tons of taxes, while the clergy and the nobility just, like, lived it up.
And it wasn't just that this inequality was there, it was getting impossible to ignore, you know?
Yeah.
We see this anger really clearly in a picture from back then.
Right.
A nobleman is shown as a spider, and he's eating a peasant who's a fly. It really shows how the common people felt like they were being used.
That's a powerful image, and it really tells you a lot about, like, the tension that was building up.
Right.
But it wasn't just social inequality.
Right,
There was
right.
also a failing economy,
Exactly.
you know, kind of throwing gas on the fire.
Harvests were bad, bread prices were skyrocketing.
So, wow.
Like, imagine your family's main food becoming something you can barely afford.
Yeah, that's tough.
The peasants and the city workers were barely getting by, and then you have this new middle class coming up.
Oh, interesting.
They were educated. They were reading guys like Locke and Rousseau, you know, Enlightenment thinkers.
Right, right.
And they were starting to question the whole system.
So you have all this anger, all this economic hardship, and all these new ideas going around.
Yeah.
It's like a recipe for revolution, right?
Oh, absolutely. And to really get how tense things were, we got to look at this thing called the Estates General. This was this big meeting supposed to represent all three estates.
Right.
It hadn't been called in over 170 years.
Wow.
But in 1789, the country was about to go bankrupt, so King Louis XVI had to call it.
Okay, so the Estates General finally meet,
Right.
and I'm guessing it didn't go so well.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The Third Estate, even though they were like the vast majority of the people, they always got outvoted by the clergy and the nobility.
Wow.
They wanted a fair system where every person's vote counted the same, not just by estate, but they were shut down. So they broke away and declared themselves the National Assembly.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the breaking point.
Yeah.
The moment when the Third Estate said, we're done with this,
Right.
and this act of defiance, this taking control, it really ignited a wave of support from the people.
That's powerful.
And then just a few weeks later, the Bastille, you know, that symbol of royal power and oppression,
Yeah.
it gets stormed by a Parisian mob. Yeah, it's incredible.
Man, the storming of the Bastille, that's like legendary. What a statement against the old way of doing things.
It really is. And it shows the energy and the anger, you know, that the revolution unleashed.
Right.
But it's also the start of something new.
Yeah.
A new chapter, you could say, full of progress, but also a lot of turmoil.
So what happens next? Does France just suddenly become this, like, perfect land of freedom and equality?
Not exactly, no.
Yeah.
The revolution was a process, a really, really messy one, and often violent, you know?
Yeah.
The National Assembly, while they were trying to write a constitution,
Right.
they also had to deal with unrest all over the place, a bad economy, and people who wanted to go back to the old ways.
I bet there were some pretty intense arguments going on.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that came out of this time was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen.
Okay.
It's a huge document.
Yeah.
And it basically says that everyone has basic rights no matter who they are or what social class they're in.
Okay. So what were some of the key rights in this declaration?
Well, it said that men are born free and equal, you know, in terms of their rights. It talked about individual freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to own property.
Wow.
Think about it. These are ideas that are still super important in democracies today.
It's pretty amazing to think how these ideas that came from such a crazy time
Right.
are still shaping our world.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing not everyone was happy about all these changes, right?
You're right. The revolution had a lot of people against it, both inside France and in other countries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they saw it as a threat. You know, there
Right.
were like royalist uprisings, people trying to bring back the king.
Oh, wow.
And even wars with neighboring countries.
So it wasn't just problems inside France.
Yeah.
They had to fight to survive against other countries, too.
Exactly. And as the revolution went on, it got more and more radical.
Okay.
The monarchy was abolished, Louis XVI was executed, and France became a republic.
Wow.
But this period, it's called the Reign of Terror.
Yeah.
It was a time of really extreme actions and brutal repression.
The Reign of Terror, that's a pretty scary name.
It is.
What caused things to get so violent?
Well, there were a few things.
Yeah.
Threats from outside, divisions within France, and this growing sense of paranoia among the leaders of the revolution.
Really?
Yeah, Robespierre, he was a key figure in the revolution. He believed that they had to use terror to protect the Republic from its enemies.
So they were trying to protect the revolution.
Yeah.
By using fear and violence.
Sadly, yes.
Wow.
The guillotine, it became the symbol of this era.
Right.
They used it to get rid of anyone they saw as a threat, from aristocrats to political rivals, even ordinary people who just spoke up against them.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a dark time.
You mentioned earlier that even fashion got political.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
So even the clothes people wore became a way of showing what side they were on.
Interesting.
The sans-culottes, these were working-class revolutionaries.
Yeah.
They refused to wear these fancy knee breeches that aristocrats wore.
Right.
They wore simple trousers instead, you know? It was a symbol of their defiance, and it showed they were connected to the working class.
Right.
They even stopped using the traditional monsieur and madame.
Oh, why?
They preferred to call everyone citizen.
Okay.
It was all about equality, you know?
Yeah.
From the way they dress to the words they use.
It's amazing how a revolution can touch every part of life.
It really is.
But this reign of terror it couldn't have gone on forever, right?
No, it didn't. The terror ended up destroying the very people who started it.
Wow.
Robespierre himself, he was arrested and executed. That was the end of that bloody chapter.
It's kind of a sad irony, isn't it?
It is.
The people who led the revolution
You're right.
ended up being victims of it.
Yeah, it shows you what can happen when power goes unchecked,
Yeah.
even when it's in the name of a revolution.
Right. So the reign of terror ends.
Yes.
And what happens to the women who were part of the revolution? They were really active from the beginning, weren't they?
Absolutely. Women were at the forefront of so many key events, from the storming of the Bastille to the March on Versailles.
Right.
They formed their own political clubs, they debated ideas, and they demanded equal rights.
So tell me more about these women who are fighting to be heard.
Well, one of the most incredible figures is Olympe de Gouges.
Okay.
She was a playwright and a political activist, and she wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women and Citizen.
Wow.
She was directly challenging the fact that women were left out of the earlier declaration.
What kind of rights was she fighting for?
Her declaration covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
The right to education, the right to own property, the right to divorce, even the right to hold political office.
Wow.
She argued that women are equal citizens and should have the same rights and responsibilities as men.
That's incredibly progressive for that time.
It is.
How did people react to her declaration?
Unfortunately, she met a lot of resistance.
Oh.
Women's political clubs were shut down during the terror.
Oh.
And Olympe de Gouges herself was executed. They accused her of being an enemy of the revolution.
That's terrible.
It shows the complex and often contradictory nature of the revolution.
Yeah.
It fought for some freedoms, but it also showed the limits of those freedoms, especially for women.
It reminds us that even during a revolution, the fight for equality is a long and hard one.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to just overthrow a system. You have to change people's minds, challenge their deeply held beliefs.
Exactly. Even though Olympe de Gouges' ideas were seen as radical back then,
Right.
they paved the way for future generations of feminists who would keep fighting for women's rights.
Her courage and her vision are truly inspiring.
They are.
So with all the chaos going on inside France,
Right.
how did the revolution affect the rest of the world?
Well, the French Revolution had a huge impact on global politics and ideas.
Really?
Yeah. Its ideas spread throughout Europe and beyond, inspiring movements for change, republicanism, and the end of feudalism.
So it wasn't just about changing France.
Yeah.
It was about changing the world.
Exactly. And one of the biggest examples is the abolition of slavery in French colonies in 1794.
Wow.
While it was only temporary, Napoleon brought it back later.
Right.
It was still a turning point in the fight against slavery and the recognition of universal human rights.
It's amazing how the revolution in France had such a ripple effect.
Yes.
It changed the lives of people all over the globe.
It really shows how powerful ideas can be. They can cross borders and inspire action.
So it's amazing to think about all these events in France sparking such like widespread change. But what happened next? Did the revolution just kind of fade away?
Well, not really. You see, from all the chaos and the instability after the Reign of Terror, a new guy appears, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Okay.
He was a brilliant military strategist, and he climbed the ranks quickly, taking power in a coup d'etat in 1799.
Ah, Napoleon.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that name. But how does he fit into the whole story of the revolution?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it's one that historians are still arguing about today.
Oh, wow.
On the one hand, Napoleon, he ended the revolutionary chaos.
Right.
He created a more stable and centralized government.
Yeah.
He made a lot of reforms, like a new legal code, a standardized education system, and a more efficient bureaucracy.
So he brought order to everything. But what about the ideals of liberty and equality? You know, the things that started the revolution. Did Napoleon keep those going?
That's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
While Napoleon, he was okay with some principles of the revolution, like legal equality and religious tolerance, he really concentrated power in his own hands.
Okay.
He became emperor in 1804.
Really?
And remember how slavery was abolished?
Yeah.
Well, even though he supported it at first, Napoleon brought it back in the French colonies.
So he was a pretty complex figure, huh?
Yeah.
He was a product of the revolution,
Yeah.
but he also went against some of its most important principles.
Right.
It's interesting how history is rarely simple, It's full of contradictions and things you don't expect.
Exactly. And Napoleon's reign, while it marked the end of the French Revolution as like a specific period, it also helped spread a lot of its ideas across Europe through his conquests.
Wow.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A dictator spreading the ideas of liberty and equality.
Yeah, it's almost like the revolution took on a life of its own, going beyond France and shaping the course of history. So looking back at this crazy time, what are some of the most important things we should remember?
Well, I think the French Revolution shows us just how powerful ideas can be. They can shape societies and change the world.
Right.
It shows us that even the most powerful systems can be challenged and overthrown.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that revolutions, while they're often driven by good intentions, they can also be messy, violent, and unpredictable.
Right. It's a cautionary tale, but it's also one that gives us hope.
Definitely.
It shows us that change is possible.
Yeah.
That even when people are being oppressed, they can rise up and demand a better world.
Absolutely. And even though the French Revolution ended over 200 years ago, its legacy is still with us today.
Right.
The ideas of human rights, of the people having the power, of striving for liberty and equality, these all came from the French Revolution. And they're still inspiring movements for social and political change all over the world.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just something we read about in books. It's a living force that shapes who we are and what we become.
Exactly. And if this deep dive into the French Revolution has left you with more questions than answers,
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It means you're really thinking about history, wrestling with its complexities, and that's what makes it so interesting.
Absolutely. So to our listener, as you keep learning about the French Revolution, think about this. What would it have been like to actually be alive back then?
Yeah.
Would you have gotten swept up in the excitement of the revolution?
Right.
Would you have resisted it? Or would you have been stuck in the middle, just trying to survive in a world that was totally upside down?
It's a question that makes you think, and it challenges us to try and understand what those people went through.
Right.
And to appreciate how much what they did still affects us today.
And who knows, maybe by thinking about these questions, you'll discover a new perspective, a story that was hidden, or a connection to the past that you never knew existed.
That's what's so great about history. It's a journey of discovery, full of surprises and things to learn.
Exactly. So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.